I've never seen anything, no light, no shadows, no nothing. The next thing I recall, I was in Harborview Medical Center and looking down at everything that was happening, and it was frightening because I'm not accustomed to see things visually because I'd never had before.
Welcome back to Cosmic Consciousness. My name is Jonas, and in this video I'm going to be discussing a research article titled Near-Death and Out-of-Body Experiences in the Blind, a study of apparent eyeless vision. This is an incredible investigation of near-death experiences that challenges some of our basic scientific assumptions about the nature of consciousness and life and death. People who have near-death experiences typically report detailed visual perceptions. So what happens when a person who has been blind from birth has a near-death experience? If that individual is suddenly somehow able to see and can accurately describe visual perceptions, what does that tell us? This video is going to share some of the incredible findings from this study and examine why the researchers ultimately conclude that consciousness very well may continue after the death of the physical body. Could it be that there is some truth to the idea of an afterlife in a way that we don't yet understand? Join me and let's explore.
Brad Barrows has been blind since birth, but one day, 27 years ago, gravely ill with pneumonia, Barrows stopped breathing. Brad believes he was on the verge of death and had begun his trip to heaven.
It was very peculiar to me. In fact, to this day, I'm not sure I can fully explain it. I truly believe I was there.
Brad and Vicky were both participants in this study, and their stories lead us straight to the heart of some of life's biggest questions. While mainstream science insists that near-death experiences are simply explained as hallucinations in the brain, there's now more evidence than ever before that this is simply not the case, and many of these near-death experiences cannot be explained by any conventional means. Did you know that around 5% of people have a near-death experience at some point in their lives? Research shows that more than 10 million people in the United States have had a near-death experience, with at least 200 to 300 million more of these cases worldwide. That's a huge number. This phenomenon is way more common than I would have guessed. And even if just one of these cases, just one, had some reality or truth to it, that alone would change our understanding of life and death forever. All over the world, regardless of social, cultural, or religious background, there's a remarkable consistency to these experiences where people almost always describe the same key characteristics.
If you look through cultures, through different ages, children as young as 3 years old, people from all over the world, from Japan, from India, and other places, have all described essentially the same experience.
Keep in mind that these near-death experiences are occurring during a period where the individual has crossed the clinical threshold of death. In other words, their heart has stopped beating and their brain has completely shut down. If these were all hallucinations, then we would expect a lot of variation in these near-death experiences, especially from different religious or cultural backgrounds around the world. But that's not what we find. So let's turn our attention back to this article. Given the consistency in near-death experiences, the researchers were curious if blind people would also report similar characteristics and details to their experiences. And towards that end, the researchers interviewed 31 blind individuals who had near-death and out-of-body experiences. And 31 individuals is a small sample size. More research is absolutely needed here, but nonetheless, this study provides some amazing evidence. The researchers found that near-death experiences among the blind closely resembled near-death experiences amongst the sighted and contain all of the same characteristics. And these include an awareness of being located outside of one's physical body, an overwhelming feeling of peace and well-being, moving through a tunnel or a passage, experiencing another world of much beauty, encountering spiritual beings or deceased loved ones before being invited or sent back. The researchers also confirmed that blind individuals do report visual perceptions during their near-death experiences. 80% of the sample in this study reported that they had some sort of vision during their near-death or out-of-body experience. Even among those who were blind from birth, 64% reported a visual near-death experience. Several of the individuals in this study expressed their astonishment and confusion at being able to suddenly see light and color during this near-death experience. For example, one individual said, "I had a hard time relating to seeing because I never experienced it, and it was something very foreign to me. It was like hearing words and not being able to understand them, but knowing that they were words."
I'm not accustomed to see things visually because I'd never had before. And initially it was pretty scary. I finally recognized my wedding ring and my hair, and I thought, is this my body down there? And am I dead or what?
It's really interesting to note how at first Vicky didn't recognize who this body belonged to, but soon noticed her ring and her hair. And here's where things get really strange and really interesting, because in certain near-death experiences, people report perceptions of specific details that they should have no way of knowing.
There is a class of near-death experiences where people learn things there is absolutely no way they could know, like what was on the roof of the hospital or what their family was talking about 12 miles away at lunch while they were dying in the hospital, that are impossible to adequately explain through deprivation to the brain of oxygen and various things like that.
These are called veridical perceptions, where near-death experiencers acquire verifiable information that they couldn't have obtained by any normal means. And this is some of the most astonishing and compelling evidence that these near-death experiences are much more than hallucinations, and I'll explain why. In this article, the authors describe the case of Nancy, who, despite being blind and unconscious, during her near-death experience, she correctly described detailed perceptions of an encounter between her friend and significant other down the hospital hallway. All of those details were later confirmed as accurate. And if there were just one or two isolated instances of these veridical near-death experiences, then maybe we could dismiss them as chance or coincidence. But there are hundreds of well-documented cases of these veridical near-death experiences. Let me share one or two more for you. In this article, which I'll link all of these articles below, we find the case of a woman named Maria, who had a near-death experience and recalls floating upwards out of her body and emerging on the roof.
She felt like she was about 3 stories above the ground, and she is looking at a tennis shoe that's sitting on a ledge. She said the tennis shoe was dark blue, very worn, that there was a scruff placed by the little toe, and that she saw the lace going under the heel. This is such a vivid memory for me because I walked, I remember the window. I had looked in many windows by this point and not seen anything. I looked down, and to my shock, my utter shock, there was a tennis shoe. I could not believe my eyes. I opened the window and reached down and plucked out the shoe.
During her near-death experience, Maria was not only able to indicate the location of this oddly situated object, but she was also able to provide precise details concerning its appearance. This is crazy stuff. Her body was on the operating table the entire time. So how can we explain this? In yet another article, which again I'll link below, we find a careful investigation of a case where a patient who was comatose and unconscious for multiple days correctly described numerous details from within the operating room, such as the color and location of sticky notes placed on the back of a television set. I mean, this stuff is truly remarkable, but what's even more remarkable is the fact that there are hundreds of well-documented cases like this, with millions more people across the globe who have had these near-death experiences.
Here I am as a physician who's actually studied near-death experiences and making an amazing claim that the evidence is so strong that certainly to me it proves the existence of an afterlife. There's absolutely no medical explanation, even theoretically possible, for having a cardiac arrest, having your heart stop, and being under general anesthesia, and having these incredibly detailed, lucid, vivid, dramatic near-death experiences.
After reviewing this evidence of near-death experiences in the blind, the researchers consider and evaluate a number of different explanations behind how this might be possible. But ultimately, they conclude that from a conventional scientific or medical perspective, there's simply no satisfactory explanation for these perceptions that seem impossible, these accurate visual perceptions in people who have been blind their entire lives. For that reason, the authors propose a theory which they call transcendental awareness. And this is really interesting to read in a scientific research article. But the idea behind transcendental awareness is that consciousness isn't produced by the brain. Instead, consciousness is primary. Consciousness exists independently of the physical brain and body, like a fundamental force of life itself. If that is the case, it opens the possibility that this mystery of consciousness is far beyond the physical body and brain. And this is what the spiritual visionaries and mystics have been telling us for thousands of years all over the world. Could it be that on a deeper level there is more to what we are than this one lifetime, than this one human body? Could it be that we are transcendent spiritual beings living in a temporary human lifetime? For me, the answer is absolutely yes. And I believe that the day is coming soon where science will have to come to this recognition as well. And when that day comes, it will change life on Earth forever. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me here. If you enjoyed this video, please do subscribe to support the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.